My name is Nora Kessler. I'm 27, and I'm a registered nurse. On the morning of my pinning ceremony, my mother told me to go upstairs and get dressed. When I came back down in my whites, the house was empty, and the coffee maker was still on. Through the window over the sink, I watched our truck turn off Larkin Street. My father drives. My sister is back in her honor cords, 3 seats up front, and none of them mine. I had $61 and no car. I sold mine in February. I sat on the kitchen floor for 11 minutes. Then I made one phone call. For a year afterward, people in this town told me it was a mix-up, that she thought I had a ride, that she forgot. I want to show you what I found in a kitchen drawer that June. Then I'd like you to decide whether anybody in that house forgot anything at all. To understand that morning, you have to understand the town. Delphi Springs, Missouri. 11,800 people in Callaway County. A fabrication shop, a grain elevator, a clinic, and a stretch of state route with 3 traffic lights. If you're born there, by the time you're 9, you know every person who will ever be at your funeral. Our house was on Larkin Street. 2 bedrooms and a back porch somebody converted into a room in 1978. There was a phone on the kitchen wall, beige, with a cord stretched so long it brushed the floor. Nobody used it. It rang about as often as the doorbell. But it was the number I put on my college paperwork when I was 18, because it was my number. I lived in that house. I still lived in that house. Beside the phone was the drawer. Every family's got one. Menus from restaurants that closed, a tape measure, batteries that may or may not work. So full it wouldn't shut. You leaned on it with your hip. Remember that drawer? Everything in this story is in it. I just didn't open it for 27 years. My mother sits behind glass. That's not a figure of speech either. Roberta Kessler has worked the reception window at the Delphi Springs Clinic for 22 years. There's a pane of glass with a half moon cut out of the bottom, and she slides it open and shut. Everybody in that county goes past that window eventually. You go past it when your kid has a croup. You go past it when your husband's tests come back. She knows who's on what, who lost coverage in March, who comes in alone. She wears scrubs to work, navy blue, 5 days a week, 22 years. She has never been a nurse. Hold on to that. I'm not going to explain it yet. My sister Tessa is 4 years younger. That May she was 23, graduating from Meriwether State with a communications degree and a 3.6. That's a real thing. And I want to say it up front, because some of what comes next will make her sound like nothing. She wasn't nothing. She was just the one they fed. My father is 59. His name is Emmett, and he doesn't take him. That's not a figure of speech. He can get through an entire dinner in 4 words, and 3 of them will be about the weather. And my mother had a story. Every family has one. Ours got told through a half-moon hole in a pane of glass, 8 hours a day, to nearly every household in Delphi Springs. In our story, there were 2 daughters. One of them was going somewhere. The other one had already had her turn. I heard her tell it that May, 10 days before the ceremony, I'd dropped by the clinic with the lunch she'd left on the counter, and I stood in the vestibule with the container still warm in my hands while she talked to a woman in the waiting room about Tessa, and she said it the way you say a thing you've said 200 times. That one's going to be somebody, she said. Nora had her chance. I set the lunch in the window. I didn't correct her. I hadn't in 7 years. 10 days out from my own ceremony, nobody in that house had said one word to me about it. Not once. They said it about Tessa every day. If you grew up as the reliable one, the one nobody worried about, because you never gave them a reason to, you already know how this house works. Stay with me. I'm going to take you back 7 years. To the February my father put his right hand into a machine. February of 2018, a Tuesday. My father had worked at Corliss Fabrication for 21 years. He ran a bench and ran it well, one of maybe 4 men in that shop who could lay a weld you'd put your name on. There was an angle grinder on the second bay. The guard had been taken off 6 weeks earlier by somebody on second shift who worked easier without one. Nobody put it back. Nobody wrote it up. He lost the index finger, the middle finger, and half the ring finger on his right hand. My father is right-handed. He was a welder. Sit with those 2 sentences next to each other, the way our family had to. I was 19. In my second semester of the nursing program at Meriwether State. 40 minutes up Route 54 in a car that was already old when I bought it. My grade point average that fall was a 3.9, and I was embarrassed about how happy that made me. I learned to change a dressing on my father's hand before I ever learned it in a lab. I did it at the kitchen table with a headlamp, because the overhead light in that kitchen has been wrong since 2009. He didn't look at it. Not once. Not for 3 months. He looked at the wall behind me the whole time. And I let him, because at 19 I already understood that some people can only hold still if you don't ask them to look. I want to be honest about something before I go any further. What happened to my father was real. The money problem was real. His hand was his trade, and his trade was the mortgage. And there was a stretch that spring when none of us knew how any of it would work. If you're waiting for me to say my family invented a crisis to trap me, they didn't. Nobody made anything up. They just never told me when it ended. The night it happened was a Sunday. My mother called me into the kitchen. She had the calculator from the junk drawer on the table and a stack of envelopes squared beside it. And she'd made coffee even though it was 9 at night. She didn't order me to do anything. I want to be clear about that too, she asked. She put her hand on top of mine. It's 1 semester, honey, she said. The school isn't going anywhere. Monday morning, I drove to campus, stood at the counter in the registrar's office, and filled out a withdrawal form. The woman behind the glass stamped it without looking up. The ink was low, so the seal came out smeared on one corner. She tore off the pink carbon copy and slid it under the window. I put it in my sock drawer. It stayed there 7 years. Here's what I didn't notice, because I was 19 and scared and wanted very badly to be good. Nobody asked Tessa to get a job. She was 15. There are jobs in Delphi Springs for 15-year-olds. A Dairy Queen. Detasseling in July. 11 families on our street alone who need somebody to watch a kid. Nobody asked my mother to pick up a shift. The clinic had them. Nobody talked about the second vehicle. Nobody called the union, the church, or my father's brother in Rolla. There were 4 people in that house. The math only ever ran through one of them. I'd graduated high school 10 months before that, in the Delphi Springs gym. Every family got 4 tickets. My mother used 3. She gave the 4th to her cousin Rennie, who I've met maybe 6 times in my life, because Rennie asked about it at the clinic window, and my mother didn't want to say no in front of people. My father couldn't have come anyway. That part is fair, and I've never held it against him. But I counted the seats, even then, from the floor of that gym, in a rented gown. That's who I've always been. Tessa sat on the stairs while my mother and I talked that night. I know because the 3rd step creaks, and it creaked twice. Once when she came down, once when she went back up. She didn't say anything the next morning. She looked at me over her cereal, then looked away. And I've thought about that look 4,000 times since. She was 15. She heard all of it. And what she understood, sitting on that step in the dark, was that in our house there was a certain amount of road, and it had just been decided who got to drive on it. 7 years later, I'd learned that the semester was never the problem. Delacroix. Implement sits on the north end of town, past the tracks, in a metal building with a gravel lot. Roy Delacroix has owned it since before I was born. When he hired me, his safety records were in a shoebox. I was 20. He needed somebody 2 mornings a week to get his files in order before an inspection. My mother knew his wife. That was the entire interview. It took 5 weeks. When I put the first binder in front of him, he pushed his glasses onto his head and looked at it a long time. "Huh," he said. "Nobody's ever showed me my own shop before." He gave me a desk in the back office, a wooden door across 2 filing cabinets. One corner shimmed with plywood because the floor slopes. It smelled like sawdust and burnt coffee, and it still does. I have never in my life felt safer than in that room. Once that first year, he stopped in the doorway with a work order in his hand. "You in school?" "I was." He nodded. He didn't ask again, but he remembered. Nights I worked as a nursing assistant at Regional, 10 at night to 6 in the morning, 4 or 5 nights a week. My charge nurse was Margo who'd been on that floor 26 years and could tell from across a room whether you'd eaten. She caught me with a textbook in the break room my 2nd month, Fundamentals of Nursing, used, spine held with packing tape. I thought I'd be written up. She pushed it back across the table. "Breaks 15 minutes, she said. "Make it count." So that's what I did. I read that book under fluorescent lights at 2 in the morning, beside a vending machine that hummed like a broken refrigerator. For 4 years. I never enrolled in a single class the whole time. I never stopped studying. I just stopped being a student. Here's a thing they teach you your first semester of nursing school and never take back out of you. You chart intake and output. Everything that goes into a body and everything that comes out. Milliliters. Every shift. 2 columns. You write it down and you don't editorialize. The chart exists so somebody coming on at 7 can see whether a person is being sustained or quietly running dry. I started a notebook in 2018. Spiral, 99 cents. I rolled it into 2 columns because that is the only way I've ever known to record anything. I put what I sent home on one side. I never wrote a single thing in the other. For 7 years, I kept a chart with an empty output side, and it never once occurred to me that this was information. And I did ask, I want that on the record, because I know what people say about women like me. April of that first year, I asked when I'd be going back. She was wiping the counter and didn't stop. "We'll look at it in the fall, honey." In August, I asked again. She said your father has a follow-up in October. Let's get through October. In November, I didn't ask, and I want to be exact about why. It wasn't that she said no. She never said no. Not once in 7 years. She moved it a little further out each time, kindly, while doing something else with her hands. You cannot argue with a woman who agrees with you. And every month I sent money home. Not the same amount. That's what people get wrong. Never a set number, never a standing transfer, nothing anybody could point at. Some months $1,400, some months $200, because that was what was left. My mother would text a picture of a bill, or mention my father's prescriptions at dinner in the middle of a sentence about something else, and I'd move the money before bed. August of 2021. They drove Tessa to campus. All 3 went. They rented a dolly. My mother packed a cooler of sandwiches for a 40-minute drive. I worked a double. At 2 in the morning, I sat in the break room and watched the pictures come up. Tessa on a bare mattress, Tessa with a lamp still in the box, Tessa in front of the red brick building where I took anatomy 3 years before she set foot there. My mother's caption said, "So proud of our girl, first one in the family." I read it twice. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I put my phone in my locker and worked the last 4 hours of my shift. That's the part that frightens me now. Not that she wrote it, that I let it go by. I re-enrolled at Meriwether State in the fall of 2022 at 24. Same counter, same pane of glass, same row of orange plastic chairs in the hallway. I sat in the exact chair I'd sat in the day I withdrew. I don't believe I did that on purpose, and I've never decided if that makes it better or worse. The woman pulled up my file and said my old record was still active, so readmission would be simple. "Everything's still here from before," she said. "Address, contact number, just redeclare." "Nursing," I said. "Same as before." There was a line on that form for a cell number, optional. I left it blank. I'd been on a prepaid plan since 2019 and had changed numbers 3 times in 2 years, because that's what happens when you buy minutes at a gas station. I didn't want a form carrying a number that'd be wrong by Christmas. So my file woke back up exactly as I'd left it in 2018. The house on Larkin Street and the beige phone on the kitchen wall, listed as the best way to reach me. Nobody thought twice. Neither did I. It was still my address. It was still my phone. I told them at dinner. My mother was serving and didn't set the spoon down. "That's nice, honey," she said. "Is it expensive?" Tessa was texting under the table. My father was eating. I waited 15 seconds. Then somebody asked about the leak in the garage. Nobody asked what I was studying. 3 weeks later, I tried again. I waited until my father was at the table, because by then I'd worked out that she was different when he was in the room. Not better, slower. "I've got pharmacology this term," I said. "It's the one that washes people out." My mother said, "That's nice." Then, "Tessa's advisor thinks Tessa could do grad school." 11 words about me. Then the subject changed. My father was there for all of it. He passed me the salt. "I need you to understand what that does. Because if it's never been done to you, it sounds like nothing. It isn't cruelty. Nobody raised a voice. A thing about you gets set on a table and nobody picks it up. And if that happens enough, you stop bringing things to the table." That night, I worked out how many credit hours I needed. 106. I took 15 or 16 every fall and spring, plus summer terms. I kept the books at Delacroix 2 mornings a week. And for 2 years, I kept my nights at Regional too, until the fall of 2024, when my body started telling me things I couldn't argue with. There was one Christmas. Tessa was home. She'd had 2 drinks, which for her is a lot. And she sat on the counter while I did the dishes, swinging her heel against the cabinet door the way she has since she was 9. She said, "Do you ever think about how you were the smart one?" "Were." I said, "No, that's what I mean." And then she looked at the doorway to see if anybody was coming, and our mother came in for ice, and Tessa got off the counter, and we never finished it. I've thought about that doorway more than almost anything else in this story. Not the sentence, the doorway. She was 20 years old, and she already knew to check. My sister was no villain in that kitchen. She grew up in a house where saying a true thing out loud had a cost, and she'd learned to check the door before paying it. Nobody teaches a child that. A child works it out. The summer of 2024, I hit a wall over a 3-credit elective. Advanced health assessment, 6 weeks in June and July. If I dropped it, I'd fall to part-time. And part-time meant losing a scholarship worth more than the class. I was $400 short. I went to the financial aid office because I had nowhere else to go. It's in the basement of Whitcomb Hall and smells like carpet glue. I got a woman named Gwendolyn Pike, who listened to the whole thing without interrupting once, then typed for about 90 seconds. She turned her monitor around, printed something, slid it across the desk. 600, she said. It's what I've got. Take the class. It came from an emergency fund I'd never heard of and have never found since. I folded the receipt into fours and stuck it in the back cover of my textbook. The way you keep something. Those 3 credit hours were going to decide everything. At the time, all I could see was that they cost me a summer. I've done my parents' taxes since 2022. Every February, my mother handed me the shoebox. Reebok, rubber band replaced 4 times. You're better at this than the man we used to pay, she said. Every year. And every year I let it land. Tessa's tuition forms were in that box. All 4 years. I filed them. I claimed the credits. I knew to the dollar what my sister's school cost, and never once thought about it, because knowing my family's money was simply what I did. This February, near the bottom of the box, I found a paper folded and unfolded so many times it had gone soft as cloth. A settlement statement. There were 2 pieces to what happened to my father. I'd known one. The first was Missouri workers' compensation, temporary total disability 2/3 of his weekly wage, about $590 a week, from 2018 plus a scheduled award for the fingers, because the state has a table for that. Somebody once decided what an index finger is worth. The second I'd never heard of. The grinder was made by an outside manufacturer. The guard had a design defect. And there was a third-party suit my parents never mentioned. It settled in December 2019, $218,000 gross, minus 1/3 for the attorney, minus the compensation fund's lien. Net $74,000. Stapled behind it was a 1099-INT for the interest that accrued while the settlement sat. Interest is taxable. That form is the only reason this sat in a box of tax paperwork. The only reason I saw it. I read the date 3 times. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was 9. I counted on my fingers. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. $74,000 came into that house in December 2019. By then, I'd been sending money home 22 months, and nobody told me to stop. I turned the page. Underneath was a purchase agreement. February 2020, a Silverado, 2 years old, $31,000, cash. I remember the day they brought it home. My mother made us climb in back to show how the seats folded. The fella at church put us onto it. We got a real deal. That truck sat in front of our house 5 years. There was a dealer sticker in the windshield that never came off, and I'd looked at it so often it had stopped being a thing I could see. And I want to be honest, I did think it. In the driveway, hand on the door. Where did that come from? Then she said the fella at church, and I set it down. Not because I believed her, because I worked 11 hours that day, and the question was heavy, and I had nothing free to carry it with. That's what nobody tells you about holding a family up. You don't miss the clues. You just have no hand free to pick them up. I put it back in the shoebox, finished the return, filed on time, and handed my mother her copy in a manila envelope. And I did not say one word. In March, I pulled every bank statement going back to 2018. Then I took out the notebook, and for the first time in 7 years, I wrote in the right-hand column, 88 months, $61,700. Then I opened Tessa's tuition forms, the ones I knew by heart. 4 years after her scholarship, $54,000. 74 came in. 31 went to the truck. That leaves 43. The gap was 11,000. In those same 4 years, I sent home 24,800. I said it out loud in that back office because I needed a human voice to say it. The gap was 11,000. I sent 24. I wasn't helping my family. I was my sister's tuition. Roy knocked on the doorframe. He does that even when it's open. He looked at the screen, then at a woman at a plywood desk, not moving. He didn't ask. He sat on the folding chair by the filing cabinet 20 minutes while I stared at nothing. Then he went back to the counter. Here's the part I'm not proud of. I found all of that in February and March. And in March, I sent the money. In April, I sent it again. Not much. $200. I can't explain it. Except this. When you've given as long as I had, giving stops being generosity. It's the shape you're in. Stopping felt like standing up in the middle of a movie. That's not a woman who got fooled. That's a woman so used to being needed, she couldn't make her own hand stop. I was one. I'm not going to dress it up. Meriwether holds your diploma if you owe money. I owed $2,310 from a summer term. Aid didn't cover. In February, I sold my car. A 2011 Focus. 148,000 miles. A kid from Fenton handed me $2,700 in an envelope behind the grocery store. Run's fine, I told him. Heater takes a minute. $23.10 to the bursar, $148 for the whites and cap you buy those. You don't rent them. By mid-May, I had $61. I'd given up my nights at Regional the fall before. Delacroix is 1.8 miles from the house, and I walked it. That April, Roy started opening 15 minutes later than he had for 30 years. It took me a month to work out why. He never mentioned it, and I never thanked him. My last class met the 2nd of May. Those 6 weeks I rode in with a classmate out toward Fenton. If you've never had a nurse in the family, here's what a pinning is. It's older than the diploma. It goes back to Florence Nightingale. The morning of graduation, they put you in a room with your class and call your name. And somebody pins the school's pin on your left side, over your heart. The person who pins you is supposed to be the one who got you there. Most people pick their mother. In March, I asked mine. She was folding towels and didn't stop. Of course, honey, she said, and she set the towel on the pile. That was the whole conversation. 2 words and a towel. There were 4 places this could have stopped. 1, an email. It went to my student address, which I used for one thing, turning in work at 2 a.m. The subject line said action required. So did the other 1,900. 2, the portal. There's a line on the graduation tab. Commencement honors. Next to it, 1 word, pending. I refreshed it 3 times and closed the laptop. I chart vital signs for a living. I know a wrong number when I see one. I didn't ask. Because my family had spent 7 years teaching me the answer. Of course it isn't me. 3. The bookstore. When I picked up my whites, the girl said there was a hold on my order. Honors regalia, see the dean's office. I'd sold my car 8 weeks earlier to clear a $2,300 balance. So I heard the word hold the only way a person like me can. I said it's fine. I walked out. 4. My mother answered the phone. 3 of those were mine. I won't pretend otherwise. But mine were accidents. Hers was a hand picking up a receiver on 3 separate days. Things I noticed and set down. A page torn off the legal pad. When my mother only ever folded the top sheet back. Her going for the mail at 3:20 instead of 4:40. And one afternoon in early May, her voice through the kitchen floor, 1 sentence came clean, and I've heard it in my sleep since. She's at work, my mother said. I'll pass it along. On the night of the 16th, she put her head in my room. Get to bed. Big day tomorrow. First time in 3 weeks, anybody there had mentioned the next day. Before I tell you about that Saturday, has anybody ever answered a phone call meant for you or told you afterward they just forgot? Put it in the comments. Saturday, the 17th of May, pinning at 9:30. At 8, my mother was pouring coffee with her back to me. Go get ready. We're leaving at 8:30. So I went up. I put on the whites and my grandmother's earrings. I sat on the bed a minute because my hands were shaking and I didn't want anybody to see them. Then I heard a car door. And another. And another. And then the engine. I came down at 8:22. The kitchen was empty. The coffee maker was still on. I called my mother. Voicemail. My father. Voicemail. Tessa. Voicemail. The rideshare app said the nearest driver was 47 minutes out. Then the coffee maker clicked off. The way they do when the timer runs out. It was the loudest thing in that house. I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet, in my whites, 11 minutes. I didn't cry. I felt almost nothing but an enormous quiet, like the moment after you drop a glass and before it hits. At 8:33, I called Roy Delacroix. The third Saturday in May is the biggest morning of his year. He answered on the second ring. I got 6 words out. Where are you? Nora! He was in my driveway in 14 minutes, which means he locked the shop and drove faster than he should have. There was a dog blanket on the seat. He moved it behind him. At the light on Route 54, he looked over. You got shoes on. I looked down, work sneakers, gray, toe-going. Under the whites, you couldn't see them unless you looked. And Roy Delacroix was looking. I laughed. It came out sideways, and I couldn't stop. And then I wasn't laughing anymore, and I turned to the window. He let me. The light changed. Seatbelt, he said. We'll make it. 9:21. The lots at Hendricks Fieldhouse were full, so he swung around back to the loading door. A woman stood in the sun in a lanyard, phone to her ear, scanning every face around the corner. She saw me, and she said a name into the phone, my name. Corinne Ballard works for the dean. She came at me fast, took my arm above the elbow, her face pure relief. Oh, thank God. We called your house 3 times. Your mother said you'd be here. I stopped. People went past gowns and cords, and somebody's grandmother in a wheelchair, and I said the only thing I could think of. Why would you call about me? And Corinne Ballard stopped too. She looked at me, really looked, and something crossed her face I've never forgotten, because it was the face of a woman doing math very fast and getting an answer she did not want. Nora, she said, you're graduating summa cum laude, highest GPA in the nursing class. The faculty voted you class speaker. You're first out of 406. She turned the program around. The paper was still warm from the copier. Page 4, commencement address, my name, in the same 9-point type as everything else. I put 2 fingers on it. The way you touch a thing to prove it's there. When did you call? April 29th, May 5th, May 12th. Who answered? She looked up. Your mother. We were walking by then, down a corridor with cables taped to the floor. And she talked fast. The committee had gone back and forth a week. 2 of us had the same average to the second decimal. And it came down to credit hours earned in residence. 3 credit hours, she said. 3. Can you imagine I could? 6 weeks of advanced health assessment in a hot June classroom. A woman in a basement office turning a monitor around. 600. It's what I've got. Take the class. Then her voice changed. We never got your draft. It was due 10 days ago. We assumed she didn't finish. She'd assumed I was the kind of person who doesn't answer. For 3 weeks. That's who I was to her. They put us in a room off the corridor. 406 of us in whites. And beside almost everyone, somebody, a mother, a husband, an aunt from Rolau. They called my name. I stood. And there was nobody to stand with me. And from the back of that room, a 58-year-old woman in navy scrubs walked to the front. She'd come straight off a 12-hour shift. She hadn't been home. Her badge was still on her collar. Margo Oyalaran but was there. Because Corinne Ballard made one more phone call than she had to. She took the pin. She put it on my left side, over my heart, and pressed her thumb on the clasp the way you do when you want something to hold. 15 minutes, she said. You made it count. That is the moment. If you take one thing from this story, take that. Not the parking lot, not the drawer, that. We came up the tunnel into the light, and the noise hit me like weather. 4,100 people. I looked at the front row. 3rd seat, 4th, and 5th from the aisle. My father in a sport coat I'd seen him wear to 2 funerals, which doesn't close anymore, and he'd stopped trying. My sister on her feet, phone up, filming the aisle, cords down her gown. And my mother had the program, folded the long way, using it as a fan. Little flicks of the wrist, talking to the woman beside her, fanning herself, watching the door. My name was on page 4. It had been in her hand for 40 minutes, and at the back of the hall, against the wall by the concession gate, in a work shirt with Delacroix stitched over the pocket, was a 64-year-old man who'd closed his shop on the 3rd Saturday in May. There was no seat for him. Nobody had a ticket for him, so he stood. Dean Adaeze Nwosu went to the microphone and said some things about the class. Then she said it was her privilege, for the 19th year, to introduce the student with the highest cumulative grade point average in the class. And then she said my name. There's a thing that happens in a room that size. The applause starts before the meaning does. I walked up. The carpet was loose on the 3rd step, and I felt it move under my foot. I got to the podium and put my hands on it. "Good morning," I said. I found out I was standing here 20 minutes ago. 4,000 people laughed. A warm laugh, a kind one. They thought I was being modest. A whole row of my classmates lost it. 3 people didn't laugh. My mother's hand stopped. The program came to a dead halt, folded in half, in the air in front of her chest, and she looked up at the stage for the first time all morning. I reached into my pocket and took out a spiral notebook, 99 cents, cover soft at the corners from 7 years in a bag. I held it up so the room could see. "I don't have a speech," I said. "I've got a notebook, and it isn't a speech. It's a chart." The laugh that came back was smaller, and it had a question in it. In nursing, you learn to chart intake and output, everything that goes into a body and everything that comes out, 2 columns. You write it down and you don't editorialize. I let that sit. I kept one of these on my own family for 7 years, and I want to tell you what's wrong with it. I filled in 1 column. I left the other one blank, and it never once occurred to me that the blank column was information. It's the most important chart I've ever kept, and I kept it wrong. Then I said the true thing, and it was short. I said nobody gets across this stage alone, and everybody up here today is going to say that, and most of us will thank the same 4 people, and that I wanted to name mine. I said Margo Oyalaran runs nights on the 3rd floor at Regional, and she caught me with a textbook in a break room when I was 20, and instead of writing me up, she told me to make my break count. She has never met me anywhere but under a fluorescent light at 2 in the morning. I said, Gwendolyn Pike works in financial aid in the basement of Whitcomb Hall. And one afternoon last June, she found $600 for me that I still don't understand. And it bought 3 credit hours. And then I said, at the back of this room, standing up, because there was no seat for him, is a man named Roy Delacroix who fixes farm equipment in Delphi Springs. 4,000 people turned around. I watched it move through the hall like wind across a field. Heads, then shoulders, then whole rows, all the way to the back wall. And there he was, hands folded, in his work shirt. He took his cap off. Then I said the last thing. I've spent 7 years charting other people. Here's what I've learned. You can tell everything about a family by what gets written down and by what gets left out. I never used the word mother. I never used the word father, not once. In a room with 4,000 people in it, in a county where half of them knew us. I was 9 minutes in when my mother stood up. Nobody made her. She got out of her seat in the front row and walked up the center aisle, the whole length of it, past 406 graduates, and pushed open the back door and went out. She was still holding the program, and my father did not go with her. He sat there. Then he looked down and saw the program was gone, and he turned to the woman on the other side of him, and she gave him hers, and Emmett Kessler, for the first time in 2 hours, opened it. I watched him find page 4. I watched him read his daughter's name. And I watched my sister turn and look at the back of our mother going up the aisle, then turn and look at our father's face, then turn and look at the door our mother had gone out of. And I saw her understand it. Our mother wasn't surprised. I didn't stop. I finished the speech. I never looked at that door once. Lot C. 12:50. Roy's truck was out at the far end, the only place he could put it. My family was at their truck. My mother had her keys in her hand, standing between me and the passenger door. And she started before I got there. You humiliated this family, she said. I didn't answer. I turned to my father. Dad, who told you I had a ride? He looked at me, then at the asphalt. I counted 11 seconds. Your mother said you were riding with somebody from the shop. I do paperwork, I said. Alone, in a back office, on Saturdays. Then, April 29th, May 5th, May 12th, who answered the phone? My father's head came up. What is she talking about? He said it to her, not to me. And my mother stood in a parking lot with her husband and both her daughters and a man in a work shirt watching from 40 feet away. And she said, she only gets today. Nora, you've got your whole life. I want you to hear how she said it. She wasn't ashamed. She was explaining something to a slow child. She'd done that math years earlier, and it had never once occurred to her that anybody would check. And my father said, Bobby, say that again. She didn't. Tessa sat down, right there on the curb at the end of the parking space, in her cap and honor cords, arms on her knees. My father looked at the program in his hand. Then he opened the truck door and got in. He didn't slam it. He didn't say anything to her. He didn't say anything to me. He chose the easier thing. Again. But he'd said one sentence out loud first. And I want to give him that, because it's the only one he ever paid for. I took the notebook out of my pocket, put it on the hood, smoothed it flat with my palm. 88 months, I said. $61,700. My mother looked at it. I'm not asking for it back. I just needed one of you to know the number. Then I walked away. Roy had the door open before I got there. He didn't say a word. He started the truck and took the long way around the athletic field so we wouldn't sit in the line at the exit. I looked in the side mirror. My mother was at the hood, picking it up. She wasn't reading it. She was gathering it fast, folding it, putting it in her purse, so nobody in that parking lot would see. I went back to the house in the middle of June, a Tuesday, when my mother was at the clinic and my father at the parts counter. I had boxes in a borrowed car, books, mostly, the things you can't leave, and I went to the drawer by the stove because there was a spare key in there for a bike lock, and the bike was still in the garage. You have to lean on that drawer with your hip. I got it open and dug through the menus, and underneath them, flat against the bottom, was a stiff envelope from Meriwether State University, certified mail, addressed to me, sealed. I opened it with my thumb. Inside was a folder, speaker guidelines, a timeline for the morning, and 4 guest tickets. 4, underneath them, 2 cards on heavy stock, reserved, platform party family, row A, seats 3 through 6, 4 seats, row A. They sat in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th from the aisle. Those were my seats. My mother sat in a chair the university set aside for the family of the woman about to speak. She fanned herself with the program. My name was on page 4, and there were 3 of them, and 4 seats. One of those chairs was empty the entire ceremony, and nobody in my family noticed which one. One more thing should have been in that envelope, and wasn't: a parking pass for lot A, the lot by the doors, the one they hold for the speaker's family. The truck was in lot A that morning. I saw it on the way out. She took one thing out of a sealed envelope, then sealed it back up, and stapled to the front was a small green card, the kind the post office makes you sign when certified mail is delivered. Government green, a box for the date, a line for the signature, May 8th, R. Kessler. Her handwriting, the same handwriting on the grocery lists on that refrigerator my entire life. The same loop on the R, the same way she never quite closes an A. She didn't forget me. She signed for me. I sat down on that kitchen floor for the 2nd time that spring. Then I got up, and because the drawer was still open, and because I count things, I tipped it out onto the floor. Menus, a tape measure, batteries. And under a takeout menu from a place that closed in 2011 was a pink carbon copy of a withdrawal form, Meriwether State University, Registrar's Office. The stamp came out smeared on one corner. Because the ink was low. I know that form. I have one just like it. In a sock drawer since March of 2018. This one was dated December 9th, 1991. Program of Study Nursing. Name Roberta Ann Lindquist. My mother's maiden name. She was 19. I sat on that floor with 2 pink pieces of paper, 27 years apart, from the same office, with the same bad stamp. And for the first time in my life, I understood my mother completely. She sat behind glass at a clinic 22 years. In scrubs she wasn't entitled to wear, checking in every nurse in Callaway County. She knew their names, which ones had kids, which ones were tired. And then her older daughter started walking toward the exact door she'd been turned around at. So she picked the daughter who wasn't going through that door, and she fed her. I want to be careful here, because I know what people do with a sentence like that. They turn it into a pardon. It isn't one. My mother knew what that form felt like in a 19-year-old's hand. She was the only person on earth who knew exactly what she was asking of me. And she asked anyway, at a kitchen table, at 9 at night, with her hand on top of mine. Understanding her explained everything and gave me back nothing. Those are 2 different things, and it took most of a year to stop confusing them. In July, I sat outside the post office 20 minutes with that green card in my hand. Holding mail addressed to another person is a federal offense. There's a form, 30 minutes, and 1 signature. It starts with the Postal Inspection Service, and it doesn't care whose mother you are. I have her handwriting on a government card. I have the certified number and the date. I drove home. Not because I forgave her. I want to be honest with you all the way to the end. I drove home because I'd finally worked out that beating her and getting free of her were 2 different roads. And I had gas for one. Here's the part nobody tells you. The truth doesn't win on its own. By the end of June, there was a version of that Saturday going around Delphi Springs, and it wasn't mine. In it, I hadn't told my family I was graduating. I kept it quiet so I could make a scene in front of the whole town. My mother was ambushed by her own daughter and walked out because she couldn't stop crying. And people believed her. Of course they did. She sits behind the glass the whole town walks past. I got 2 texts. 2. One from a woman at church who'd known my grandmother. One from a girl I went to school with. You're expecting the town to turn. You're expecting somebody to stand up at church and say something. That's not what happened. Most people took the version easiest to hold and got on with their lives. And I stopped waiting for them. Roy offered me a job in July. Full-time, real money, benefits, his books, his safety files, his payroll. I turned him down. He stood in the doorway with his glasses up on his head and nodded a while. "Good," he said. "I'd have hired you, and you'd have been the best I ever had, and it would have been a waste." In December, I drove back one Saturday morning with a box. Inside was every safety record, insurance file, and maintenance log that SHOP has, on a system he can run himself, plus 11 pages of instructions, handwritten, for whoever comes after me. At the bottom of the last page, I'd written a line in pen, because I wanted it to stay. This system does not require me. That is the point of it. He read it twice. "That's a hell of a thing to write on a set of books," he said. I said, "It's the only way I know how to say it." And then I hugged him. He stood there about 2 seconds, the way men like that do. Then he patted my back twice firm, the way you knock on a board to hear if it's solid all the way through. In October, my sister drove 2 hours to Columbia and stood in the hallway outside apartment 4B. She didn't call first. She didn't want to give me the chance to say no. And she was right. I would have. I let her in. She stood in my kitchen with her coat still on and said it fast, like she'd practiced it in the car, which I'm sure she had. "I looked back," she said. "When we pulled out of the driveway, I saw the kitchen light on. And I knew." She was holding on to the back of a chair. And I didn't say anything, because for 1 hour I wanted to be the one they were driving to see. She wasn't asking me for anything. That's the part I keep coming back to. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She didn't ask me to come home. She didn't ask me to tell her she was still a good person. She just put it down on my counter and stood there with it. I made her coffee. She held the mug with both hands, the way she used to when she was 6. I told her the truth that I wasn't ready, that I didn't know when I would be, and that I wasn't going to lie about it to make the afternoon go smoother. And then I told her the other thing. "You can call me," I said. "Don't call me for her." She nodded. She drank her coffee. She drove home. She calls about once a month now. We talk about her job. She has never once brought up our mother, and I have never once had to remind her not to. In August, a padded envelope came with a Delphi Springs postmark. Inside was a key and a title. My father had found the kid in Fenton and bought my Focus back. There was no note. There is no note. There has never been a note. My father has never once said a sentence out loud that he could pay for instead. I didn't take the car. It sat in his driveway. Tessa told me in the fall it was still there. I asked once, then I stopped asking. The night Tessa left, I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I called my father, not to forgive him. I want to be clear about that. I called because I'd taken a job on the cardiac floor at St. Aldrich, and because he is my father, and because I had decided to become a person who can make a 2-minute phone call without needing it to fix anything. I told him about the unit and the apartment. He listened. He didn't interrupt. That's the one thing my father has always been good at. And then, at the end, he said it. I'm proud of you. For 27 years, I would have traded almost anything for that sentence. I built an entire personality around earning it. I gave up a degree, 4.5 years, $61,000, and most of my 20s trying to be handed it. It came. I said thank you. I hung up. I went and made dinner, and it didn't rearrange me. I stood at my own stove in my own apartment, cooking eggs at 9 at night, waiting to feel the thing I'd been waiting my whole life to feel. And it didn't come. That's how I knew the part of me that had been waiting had already finished waiting. Somewhere back there, without telling me. It got up and went home. In November, I opened my banking app. The transfer was already there. I didn't have to set anything up. It had existed since March of 2018. 88 months. It was the most reliable thing about me. I changed one line, the destination. $200 a month to the emergency fund in the basement of Whitcomb Hall, the one Gwendolyn Pike found $600 in, that I have never been able to locate since, and have stopped trying to. I didn't fix the part of me that gives. I don't think you get to. It's the shape I'm in, and it's probably the shape I'll die in. I just turned it around and pointed it at somebody who's going to need 3 credit hours in June. There is a 19-year-old out there, right now, standing at a counter with a form in her hand. I'm not going to meet her. That's fine. She doesn't need to meet me. She needs $600. The notebook went through the shredder that same month. Not because I forgave them, I want to be honest with you all the way to the end. I put it through because being owed something is not the same as being loved. And I had spent my whole life confusing the two. The green card went in the trash. I'd read the signature. I didn't need to keep looking at it. I kept one thing. The 4 guest tickets. They're in a drawer in my kitchen, under a takeout menu, which I did not do on purpose, and noticed a month later, and found funny in a way I don't think anybody else would. In December, on a Tuesday, I hung my diploma, by myself, level, stud finder, 1 nail, and a pencil mark I forgot to erase and still haven't. Nobody held the other side. It's in the hallway between the kitchen and the bathroom, which is a stupid place to hang a diploma, and it's where I see it 11 times a day, and the pin is on my left side, over my heart. I put it on before every shift and take it off in the parking lot after. It's the only thing I own that somebody else put on me. I took a picture of the diploma, crooked, bad light, and I sent it to exactly one person. He wrote back 3 words. We made it. You don't always get the apology, and if you do, it comes late, and it comes small, and it does not undo the thing. You have to become somebody who doesn't need it. That's the whole job. That is all of it. Somewhere in this comment section is a person still waiting for a sentence that isn't coming. If that's you, tell me what boundary you're afraid to set. Not for advice, just so it exists somewhere outside your own head. That's how mine started. And if somebody in your family ever told you they just forgot, I'd like to hear about it. I read every one of these. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe, and I'll have another one next week. There's a woman on this channel every week who thought she was the only one. Take care of yourself. Somebody should.